Edmund Kemper. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Edmund Kemper, and I was born on December 18, 1948, in Burbank, California. My parents, Clarnell and Edmund Kemper II, brought me into a world that I'd soon discover was anything but welcoming. When I turned 9 years old, they divorced. My mother took me and my two sisters to Montana, far away from the life I'd known. Living with my mother was a constant struggle. She was emotionally and physically abusive, never missing an opportunity to criticize me. Even though I was already her intellectual superior, she tried to ridicule me at every turn, making me feel like I was less than nothing. It was as if she took pleasure in tearing down my self-esteem, piece by piece. But it wasn't only emotional torment. She'd lock me in the basement for hours on end. She said it was to protect my sisters, that she feared I'd harm them. Can you imagine being locked away like some dangerous animal by your own mother? That basement became my prison, a dark place where I was alone with my thoughts, my fears, and my growing resentment of the world. When I was 13, something inside me snapped. I killed our family cat. I don't know why I did it. I just felt compelled to, and the feeling it gave me was one of immense satisfaction. A year later, I killed another cat, putting this one's head on a spike. It was like a dark force was driving me, a force which I couldn't stop. What surprised me most about this period was how easy it was to convince my mom and sisters that I had nothing to do with the death of the cats. Manipulating my family was so simple, and I derived great pleasure from this. You see, I was always different. Not only was I much taller than everyone else, but also far more intelligent. But that didn't make life easier, it made it harder. My height and intellect made me stand out, but my social awkwardness and violent tendencies pushed people away. I felt isolated, an outcast among my peers. At 15, I couldn't take it anymore. I ran away to live with my dad in California, thinking things would be different. But he had moved on and remarried, so there was no place for me in his new life. Feeling the sharp pain of rejection once more, I packed my bags and went to live with my paternal grandparents on their rural farm. That's when I did something I can't ever take back. After living with them for only a few months, I killed both my grandparents. The problems began with my grandmother, whom it was impossible to please. She constantly emasculated my grandfather and me. It felt like I was in jail, and over time, I became a ticking time bomb. One morning, after another heated argument in the kitchen, I finally blew my top. Making my way upstairs towards the room where I kept my .22 caliber rifle, my mind was clear. I snuck back into the kitchen, walked up behind my grandmother, and without a second thought, shot her in the back of the head. Why did I do it? I just wanted to know what killing a human being would feel like. And to be honest, the relief was wonderful. Strange as it may sound, that's the truth. As my grandfather returned home that afternoon, I decided to kill him on the driveway before he entered the house. Looking back, I felt it best that he died never knowing his dear wife had been murdered in cold blood. Shortly after that, I was arrested and sent to Atascadero State Hospital for the criminally insane. During my time in this institution, the psychiatrists and social workers saw me differently than the court-appointed shrinks. They said I showed no interference with thought, no expression of delusions, and no evidence of bizarre thinking. I guess you could say I was a puzzle, even to the professionals. They tested my IQ when I first got there, and it came out to be 145, putting me in the category of the highly gifted. I was more than just a number, though. I was a person who understood people, especially the ones trying to understand me. I became a model prisoner, so much so that they even trained me to administer psychiatric tests to other inmates. Little did they know, understanding those tests inside and out gave me an edge. I could manipulate my psychiatrists because I knew exactly what they were looking for. And administering tests to sex offenders? Well, let's just say I learned a lot from them too. At 21, I was released and told that I was fit to rejoin society. I could tell some of the psychiatrists weren't so sure, but they let me out anyway. I moved back in with my mother to Santa Cruz. She was working at the University of California by then. I tried to get my life back on track and took on a series of menial jobs. Nothing special, just enough to get by. I even dreamed of becoming a cop. Can you believe it? Me, a police officer. But they rejected me, not because of my past, but because of my height. I stood at 6 feet 9 inches, which was far too tall for a police officer back then. It was another blow, another rejection, another reminder that I didn't belong. Bored and disillusioned with my life, I embarked on my notorious killing spree sometime around May 1972. It began with young female hitchhikers, most of them being college students. Charming them with casual conversation and luring them into my car with the promise of a safe ride was a piece of cake. With just a few choice words and some made-up stories, I could easily gain their trust. These naive, innocent creatures had no idea what my true intentions were. My approach was meticulous and always the same. I would make sure to drive them to a secluded area before murdering them. Sometimes I'd simply shoot them. Other times I would stab or strangle them. After they were dead, I took them back to my home so I could dismember their corpses. But most importantly, I kept the heads of all my victims as trophies of my dark exploits. As twisted as it sounds, I was in love with the head of one hitchhiker. My emotions were always mixed after each murder. In one way, I received a huge sense of satisfaction, as if I had just resolved some internal tension and conflict with my mother. At other times, the feeling was more akin to relief and the quenching of an insatiable anger. It all came crashing down on Good Friday, April 20, 1973. After killing the 6 hitchhikers, I'd come to the realization that it was finally time to slay the demon that gave birth to the monster inside me. So, one night, I waited for my mom to fall asleep, then snuck into her room. I bludgeoned her with a claw hammer and slit her throat with a penknife, stabbing her repeatedly until the knife shattered. In an uncontrollable rage, I then beheaded her and mutilated her corpse. I put her head on a shelf and screamed at it, denouncing everything that she'd ever done to me. But I wasn't finished there. I also murdered her best friend, Sally Hallett. I staged it to make it look like they had both gone on vacation. But deep down, I knew that after killing my mother, something was different. So I drove all the way to Colorado, my mind racing with thoughts of what would happen next. During the trip, it slowly dawned on me that the original purpose of the killings was gone. What I was doing no longer served any physical, real, or emotional purpose. I started feeling the folly of the whole damn thing. Finally, I pulled over and found a phone booth. I dialed the police and confessed to everything. You'd think they'd jump at the chance to arrest me, but no. They didn't take me seriously at first because of how calm I was when I spoke. It was only after I gave them explicit details of my crimes that they realized I was telling the truth. That's when they realized who they were dealing with. My killing spree was over and the walls closed in. I was finally arrested and there was no turning back. During my trial, I pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Despite my plea, The jury convicted me and handed down 8 concurrent life sentences. They sent me to the California medical facility, a place I'd call home for the foreseeable future. In prison, I became what they call a model prisoner. I followed the rules, kept to myself, and even participated in interviews. The FBI took an interest in my case for their criminal psychology and profiling work. I provided them with insights into the mind of a serial killer. Maybe they thought understanding me could somehow prevent others like me from emerging. Reflecting on my life, you could say it's a dark tapestry woven from threads of psychological torment, violent tendencies, and a complete disregard for human life. I serve as a grim reminder of the depths to which the human mind can sink.